It's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is divide. Let's take a look at some of the definitions of this word. The first way this verb divide is used is in mathematics, and it means to find how many times a number contains another number. As an example, we might say 20 divided by 4 is 5. Another meaning for this verb, divide, is to separate or cause to separate. A third way we use this verb, divide, is to mean to disagree or, again, to cause to disagree. Divide is a regular verb. To make the progressive tense, we need to drop the E and then add ing. This makes dividing. To make the past tense and participle forms of this verb, we just need to add d, since this verb already ends with an e. The verb divide ends with a d or d sound. So our past tense ending is going to make an id sound. Divided. Divided. Let's take a look at some phrasal verbs next. One phrasal verb you might hear is to divide something into. And what that's going to mean is to separate. Here's an example sentence. He has divided the project into 6 smaller tasks. A second phrasal verb you might hear is to divide something off. It also means to separate something from something else, but generally we're using some sort of object to cause that separation. Here's an example sentence. We divided the sleeping area off from the rest of the room using a curtain. So that curtain is the object that's causing the separation. A third phrasal verb you might hear is to divide up, and it means to give something out in shares to people or groups. Here's an example. They divided up the profits from the garage sale. So as an example, let's say there's 2 people and they sold $200 worth of things at this garage sale. If they're dividing up the profits, maybe first person gets 100 and the second person also gets $100. This week, we're going to continue to look at active versus passive voice. And so I think it's always good to start with a little bit of a review. If we have a sentence in active voice, it is beginning with the person or the thing that is responsible for the action. You might also think of it as the person or thing doing the action. So here's an example. Mike cleaned the house. We think about this, Mike is responsible for the action of cleaning. Here's a second. Jen planted vegetables. Here, Jen is responsible for the action of planting. But sometimes when you're reading or listening to others speak, you might hear some sentences that are in passive voice. And the way we know that they're in passive voice is that they begin with the person or thing that is acted upon. The person who did the action may not be included in the sentence, or if they are included, they generally come at the end of the section, at the end of the sentence, after the preposition by. So let's take our first 2 examples that were in active voice, and we'll change them to passive voice. The house was cleaned by Mike. Vegetables were planted by Jen. And with both of these sentences, we could just say the house was cleaned, period, or vegetables were planted, period. We don't have to include who did it. And what you might be noticing here is to make passive voice, I'm using the past form of be. So here, both of the house is singular, so I'm using was. And in the second sentence, we have vegetables, plural, so I'm using were. And then what comes after that is the participle form of our verb. So you might be asking, why do people use passive voice? And the first reason it's used is sometimes the person that is responsible for the action or the person who's doing the action just is not known. A second reason is that the person doing the action just isn't important. And that might connect into our third reason, that the writer or the speaker, so depending on if this is written or spoken, really wants to emphasize the person or thing that is being acted on. This is also known as the object. So today, what we're going to do is take our verb of the day, divide, and we'll use it in active voice in the simple past, and then we'll use it in passive voice also in the simple past. Let's start by looking at an affirmative sentence in the active voice. To make an affirmative sentence in simple past, all we need to do is use our past tense form of the verb. It's going to be the same no matter what the subject is. Here's an example sentence. Volunteers divided 2,000 masks among residents in the town. If we change that sentence into passive voice, and I should tell you that this example passive voice sentence was something I saw in a news article recently, which inspired me, right? I'm going to take the object, right? So in our active voice sentence, the 2,000 masks, they received the action of dividing. So we're going to move that to the front of our sentence. 2,000 masks, and because that's clearly plural, we're going to use were and then the participle form of our verb. Were divided among residents in the town. And my guess is the writer of this sentence chose to do it this way because they wanted to focus on kind of the impact, 2,000 masks, and give or have the readers focus on that. Next, let's take a look at making some sentence negative. In the simple past tense in active voice, we're going to use did, not, and then the base verb to convey a negative simple past tense sentence. Here's an example. Researchers didn't divide patients at random into groups to test the new medication. Now, let's take a look at passive voice in the simple past and negative. Here, we're going to use were not or was not, depending on our subject, and then the participle form of the verb. Patients in the study weren't divided at random into groups to test the new medication. Finally, let's look at making yes or no questions. In the active voice, I will start with did, then I'll have my subject, and then the base verb. Did the teacher divide the students into small groups? But if I want to make that sentence passive and focus on the students, I'm going to start with were, because the students is plural. We'll have were the students, and then the participle form of our verb here. Were the students divided into small groups? Next, let's take a look at some words that are related to our verb divide. The first word is the noun form of this word. Same spelling, same pronunciation. Divide as a noun means a wide separation between two verbs. Here's an example sentence. There's a divide between Democrats and Republicans on unemployment benefits. You might see this noun form used quite often to describe the two major political parties in the United States. A second related word is also a noun. It's division. And just like our verb, it can have a few different meanings. The first is a disagreement between two or more groups. Here's an example of that. I've never sensed so much division between people. A second meaning for this noun division is each of the parts into which something is divided. Let's take a look at an example. The team plays in the Eastern Division. You might see this word division to talk about different departments at a company as well. And again, we're just dividing the company into parts. A third way you might hear the word division used as a noun is the mathematics operation of dividing. Here's an example of that. The third graders are practicing division. Next, let's take a look at an adjective. It's divisible, and it means capable of being divided by another number without a remainder. There's a strong mathematical meaning here. Here's an example. 100 is divisible by 25, but it isn't divisible by 30. So I said 100 divided by 25, we would get 4, but 100 would, or maybe you should say 100 divided by 30 is going to be 3 with a remainder of 10. So it's not even. Another way that you might hear a math teacher talk about it. Finally, our last word is an adjective. It's indivisible, and it means unable to be divided or separated. And I think probably the most common or connected way that many Americans think of this word indivisible is in our Pledge of Allegiance. So that's going to be our example sentence here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the idea is that the United States should not be able to be divided or separated. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.